The ancient weapons are not what we think. How many ancient weapons are there in the One Piece world currently? Well, if you said 3, then you'd actually be wrong. Did you know Shirahoshi isn't actually an ancient weapon, but instead just one part of a remade Poseidon? Can we once and for all solve the mystery of the Maxim? Well, I think we just did that also, so strap in for this one. It's a super spicy drop. Like and sub, and let's get into it. Oda has left some breadcrumbs concerning the truth about the ancient weapons, although very subtly. The nature of the ancient weapons and the myths they're based on provide a glimpse into the truth about how each one works, and what is required to make them work. We also get some clues about the ancient weapons on poneglyphs. The clues for Pluton and Poseidon are on poneglyphs found on opposite sides of the world. The clue for Uranus is on the moon. Once we follow these breadcrumbs, we discover there are actually quite a few different components that make up each ancient weapon. For example, each 3 seem to share a ship that's tied to the weapon, a child with the voice of all things, a giant creature, and also lineage factor. I'll give a brief description of what I mean for each component, and then I'll go into detail and explain how this all adds up. Oh, and also at the end of the video, I've got some pretty major conclusions about the voice of all things and what this means moving forward, so stick around for that. Okay, so firstly, each of the original 3 ancient weapons has ties to a ship component. Of course, with Poseidon, this is Noah. Uranus has the Maxim, and Pluton is a ship itself. Not only this, but I believe Pluton also connects to the ship that found Frankie, which I also think is the ship where the blueprints of life were found by Mads. I'll expand on this throughout the video as we go. Secondly, we have the mysterious and powerful component that commands an ancient weapon, which seems to be the mysterious voice of all things. Shirahoshi has demonstrated using her voice to control Sea Kings, even from a distance, which is said to be the power of Poseidon. In terms of Uranus, Aiza would be the young girl, as she can hear heartbeats and demonstrates uncommon haki, making her the most likely candidate. Momo is the child with the voice of all things that connects to Pluton, which also no doubt ties to Kabouterman. Interestingly, this long distance ability to control certain weapons is reminiscent of what we saw when Emu's eyes seemingly triggered part of the Mother Flame, further suggesting some strange power like the voice of all things is used in conjunction with ancient weapons. Thirdly, diving even deeper, we find lineage factor is a component in all 3, most likely to ensure the weapons can only be inherited by certain people, preventing them from falling into the wrong hands. Poseidon has the Royal Mermaid line, Uranus has the Shandian line, and Pluton no doubt is tied to the Kazuki line. There are some other strange connections the ancient weapons seem to share too, such as the fact they each tie to a really large creature. With Poseidon we have enormous sea kings, with Uranus we have these massive snakes like Nola, and with Pluton we have Zunisha. Finally, all 3 weapons appear to have a vassal of sorts, which works out to be Vanderdecken the Ninth, who's 35, Frankie, who's 36, and Enel, who's 37, demonstrating how Oda left a clue in their ages. Each of these individuals has a special insight into an ancient weapon, something which most people on the entire planet don't have. With Enel, he mysteriously knew how to build the Maxim and fly to the moon. With Frankie, we see this strange situation where he has the blueprints for a counter to Pluton, but burns them, implying the blueprints exist inside Frankie's mind now. Vanderdecken the Ninth has uncanny insight into the powers of Poseidon, and also has an interest in lineage that dates back to Joy Boy's time, where Vanderdecken the First was said to be punished by God. So, that's the brief outline of the components that make up each and every ancient weapon in One Piece. Okay, so now we've explored some basic connections, let's get deeper into the evidence and see what it can tell us, starting with Poseidon. Most of the information we receive regarding Poseidon comes from the Fishman Island arc and Shirahoshi, a 16-year-old mermaid princess with the ability to use her voice to command the enormous Sea Kings. Furthermore, in the arc, we saw Poseidon unleash her power to use the Sea Kings to move Noah. Here we have an ability akin to the voice of all things, moving the ship component I mentioned earlier. This was also the same arc in which the 35-year-old Vanderdecken was a main antagonist, and he mysteriously had knowledge of Shirahoshi's power. There's an absolute ton of spice on Vanderdecken that gets completely overlooked, but for now I'm going to focus on the connections to Poseidon and cover VDD9 in his own video. As I touched on before though, the original Vanderdecken was alive during the era when Poseidon assumably existed, and the legend around his death is questionable at best. The fact Shirahoshi is royalty implies her lineage is key to the ancient weapon Poseidon. That said, I actually believe Shirahoshi isn't Poseidon, as we've been led to believe. Instead, Shirahoshi is a pseudo-Poseidon, much like the Mother Flame is to Uranus. Evidence that suggests this lies 200 years ago in the story, when I speculate the former mermaid princess was kidnapped from a reverie-type situation where the fisherman was said to have been signing the treaty with the celestial dragons. I believe the Iron Giant was summoned to Marijua when the princess was kidnapped and implanted with Sea King lineage factor. This in turn made a pseudo-Poseidon in the form of a giant mermaid that can control Sea Kings 3 or 4 generations later. I predict it will be revealed that the princess was impregnated with Sea King lineage factor in some form, paralleling what we were shown in the arc about Fishman bloodlines. The loose time frame we are given for Poseidon's reincarnation being a few centuries may connect to the long life of Sea Kings. Moving on to the next ancient weapon, we have the only one to not explicitly be revealed yet. Uranus is personified in myth as the god of the skies. This ties to Skypiea in the One Piece world, which is where we find a range of clues regarding the ancient weapon. Skypiea is home to the Shandian people. Amongst the Shandian descendants is a young girl, much like Shirahoshi, called Aiza. She has the ability to hear other people's heartbeats akin again to the voice of all things. Because of this ability, Aiza notes that she hates it when people die, as she can hear what she describes as people's voices being silent. This is exactly what Momo noticed about Luffy in Wano when Luffy died or didn't die, depending on how you look at it. She's the youngest character I could find that possesses Kenbun Shoko Haki, suggesting she inherited the ability through her lineage. The young girl was seen inside the enormous snake Nola alongside Luffy. Her birthday is January the 3rd, giving us the numbers 1 and 3, making 13, which is how many rings Uranus has, and her height is 140 centimeters, or 4'7", which may be a reference to one complete day on Uranus being 17 hours and 14 minutes. Additionally, she lives in the sky, which is reminiscent of Uranus being the god of the heavens, and also Aiza is the name of one of the 3 powerful fates in Greek mythology, echoing the 3 ancient weapons. Furthermore, there's a panel that explicitly mentions heaven, and Aiza is in that panel. Also, we see Aiza react on the same page to Enel firing 100 million volts, a nod to the fact Aiza has the ability to control a similar firepower through Uranus. There's a cover page featuring Aiza, which is a cool clue that connects to Uranus and the Mother Flame. In it, we see a harp, we see Aiza, and we see a burn bazooka, which is the lightning tube. The harp represents the voice of all things, and we've seen this in other covers before, particularly one with Vivi. Aiza depicts lineage, which she attains through her Shandorian descent, and the burn bazooka represents Uranus's tremendous electrical firepower. Bear this bazooka in mind for now, because I'll bring it up in a bit. Aiza being Shandian means her ancestors lived on the moon, and have since descended to the blue planet to settle on Skypiea, the reverse of what we see with the 37-year-old Enel, who also featured in the Skypiea arc. A long unresolved mystery is how Enel knew about the moon, despite the fact we've never heard traces of such information anywhere in the One Piece world. Additionally, we don't know how he knew to build the Maxim, which I believe to be the ship component of Uranus. Considering his strange ties to electricity, the Rumble fruit, and the moon city of Burka, it strongly suggested the fruit was in the hands of the Shandians originally. This is further depicted by the moon murals, as an individual can be seen holding a rod controlling Automata, just like Enel in the same cover story. It could be that Enel is aware of lesser known information through inheriting the will of the Rumble fruit. Now, this is actually super important to the endgame, and I'll explain why now. We saw a pseudo version of the ancient weapon Uranus in the form of the Mother Flame, created by Vegapunk satellite York. This echoes the idea of a pseudo-Poseidon I discussed earlier. Aiza's nickname is Cloud Ball Girl, which could be a reference to the original Uranus going off what we saw of the Mother Flame when it attacked Lalesia. And we also see a page where Aza is with Luffy as he makes a huge ball reminiscent to this exact same attack. Remember that bazooka I mentioned earlier? Well, two versions of this bazooka exist in Skypiea, which are the Flame Bazooka and the Burn Bazooka. The Flame Bazooka is less intricate and parallels the Lalesia Blast from the Mother Flame. This version is likely weaker than the original. The Burn Bazooka represents the original Uranus and fires a powerful blast by utilising breath dials. The use of dials is kinda interesting here too, as some speculate dials to be from the moon, much like the ancient weapon itself in my opinion. Likely put together on the ancient Egghead Island, it's possible York discovered schematics or blueprints for Uranus there, and subsequently created the Mother Flame from them. The island is an ancient island with futuristic technology. We've only ever seen this once before, which was on Burka, the city on the moon that shares the same name as the secret tribe in the Sky Islands. This suggests Egghead, the moon, and Skypiea are tied to Uranus. The murals on the moon appear to depict some references to ancient weapons too, such as a spaceship and also sea creatures. Additionally on the moon, we see Enel used his devil fruit to electrify automata, subsequently powering them up and reviving the city of Burka. In One Piece, it's implied the fuel sources of the ancient weapons are particularly significant. The biggest clue is the name of York's modern version of Uranus, the Mother Flame. It's highly likely the flame part of the name references the fuel source it uses, which is why Imu wanted to use it somewhere close. Otherwise, the freezer in Marijois and potentially even the land would heat up. This is further implied by the fact Egghead runs on flame energy, which is where the weapon was probably developed, as I said. This is likely not the same energy source that Uranus was fueled by. The city of Burka was powered by electricity, so that's definitely the most likely candidate for what powered this particular ancient weapon. A huge indicator to this again is Enel, who had the Rumble fruit. Interestingly, there's yet another reference to hair here as well, when Aza is told to grow hers out naturally. This is so strange considering she's a transmitter of sorts for Uranus, and as I've mentioned many times before, this seems tied to Dak's Lafro Tale video. Quick note as well, if you've seen 1088, recently the anime episode that dropped, you would have been reminded that Brooke saw the eddy that Bonnie was stuck in and said, "It looks like an afro." Throwaway line. Very strange stuff. If you haven't seen Dak's video, make sure you check that out. Dr. Tsukimi is a cool side character that fits in here too, as his name means Moon Watcher, and we saw him deeply involved with automata. He also has a strange looking head, and we don't even know what century he's from, so there's plenty to suggest he plays a part here too. I wonder if Dr. Tsukimi's automata run on electricity like they do on the moon. Definitely seems that way considering what Enel did to them. Finally, let's take a look at Pluton. Sukiyaki Kazuki brought Robin deep into Mount Fuji and revealed Pluton resting below the mountain. The current leader of Wano is Sukiyaki's descendant, who just so happens to be a child. This covers the lineage part of the ancient weapon. I hope you're beginning to see the patterns here. This young boy happens to also be able to hear the voice of all things and can even speak with the enormous elephant Zunisha. The only other person than Sukiyaki and Robin we know with such deep ties to Pluton is the 36-year-old Franky. Pluton is a ship itself, so the ship component of this ancient weapon may be obsolete in that sense. However, Franky was saved by a mysterious ship with no one aboard controlling it, so this may also be the ship component in a sense. It's possible it was Franky's heartbeat that caused the boat to find him, provided to him via his lineage. The fact his parents were pirates teases the idea of Franky having a strange lineage as well, further implied by his ominous connections to Vegapunk. This is where it gets really interesting though. We don't know what boat Mads found the blueprints to life on. The blueprints to life were the instructions to how to use lineage factor pretty much. So if this was the same boat that saved Franky and it's connected to Pluton, then it means the ship component of this particular ancient weapon held the secret to how to actually use ancient weapons, which is through lineage factor. Bit mind-bending, but hopefully you understood what I'm saying there. The fact Pluton is under Wano opens the possibility also that the other ancient weapons can still be found, hidden somewhere in the world. Possibly Uranus is on Egghead, and the original Poseidon is tied to the sea prison Impelled Down or Amazon Lily. In terms of a pseudo-Pluton, as I discussed with the other two ancient weapons, there is a strong possibility we will see one shortly. The third pseudo-ancient weapon would be a modern version of Pluton, which Franky will encompass alongside the Thousand Sunny. In short, we've seen Franky become more and more cyborg throughout the series, up until the point where he chooses the futuristic clothing style over his usual Hawaiian on Egghead. This resulted in Franky's entire body being transformed, with even Franky's eyes being covered with technology, and we all know eyes seem pretty important in One Piece. We also have had a bunch of references to Franky being in water, most prolifically when he refused to eat the mirror because he wished to swim. In fact, what he actually said is that he did not want to become a hammer, which is likely a reference to becoming a weapon as well, which Franky does not wish to become. This in turn ties to Kuma and the Buccaneers and how the Buccaneer had potentially become weaponized by the world government, but you can see more of that in my previous Franky video. Now, tying everything together, we have 3 children, each with an ability resembling the voice of all things, each shown with an incredible large creature. Each of them reside in a location connected to an ancient weapon, Joy Boy and Poneglyphs. They're all likely to have significant lineage factor also. They all have ties to a ship, which is Noah for Shirahoshi, the Maxim Aza witnessed, and the Pluton reveal given by Momo's family member. Furthermore, each shares intimate scenes with Luffy, and every ancient weapon seems to be paired with a specific adult character too, with Vanderdecken being 35, Franky 36, and Enel 37. All 3 of these characters have uncanny ties to their respective ancient weapons, and no doubt we'll hear more about each of them. There is more evidence that backs up these ideas, found mostly in the subtle uses of language Oda used, such as Aza being on panels where heaven is mentioned. But I'll leave that for you guys to discover, and if you do find anything, make sure to come back and drop a quick comment, or hit me up on the Discord. In conclusion, it looks as though we could be seeing 3 ancient weapons going against 3 pseudo-ancient weapons, which are in fact modern by the end of the story. No doubt they'll all be destroyed by the end of the series after we see their capabilities. I personally think it'll be revealed the ancient weapons were originally intended for good, but have since been weaponized, if you get what I mean. The world government can change the language and make them seem like something they're not. I think lineage factor will be revealed to be the key to operating the weapons, which will be tied together through the ship that saved Franky being the same as the ship that Mads discovered lineage factor on. Lastly, an interesting observation I made when I put this together was that the characters that tie to the voice of all things each connect to heartbeats, making me think that heartbeats around the world create a lattice of frequency. This frequency is the voice of all things. Zoro observed a breath of all things in the rocks, which will be because it has no heartbeat yet still contains energy. Now, if this is true, then there's some wild implications. For example, if Katrina Devon can imitate a person's heartbeat with her devil fruit, this could be crucial to Blackbeard's plan. She may even be able to copy and become Nika. This is juxtaposed by Brook, who doesn't even have a heart, let alone a heartbeat. I wonder if this will tie in later. Either way, the giant mech seems to be affected by the heartbeats of some, and with that I will leave it there.
Thank you, Cushy. Now let's expand a little bit more on this theory, shall we? I believe that the 3 ancient weapons formed a giant vessel that was intended to take a community of different scholars, scientists, explorers, and races on a journey to explore the cosmos, and possibly avoid a cataclysmic disaster fabricated by the ruler of the world, Imu. This community of races was known as the Ancient Kingdom, and they were essentially the first ever pirates, the first ever culture that dreamt of truly being free from the world. I just want to throw this out there. You want to know how I know that the ancient weapons are not simply just instruments of destruction? That's easy. It's because the world government has branded them so. But moving on, let's talk machine parts. Poseidon, commonly represented as a weapon capable of controlling the Sea Kings. Might even be likened to a communication or a control device within the ancient voyage machine. Its ability to manipulate the sea and creatures within it could be interpreted as a means of coordinating or commanding other parts of this machine. Perhaps the Sea Kings choose to primarily live in the calm belt because it's the only thing that resembles the harsh vacuums of space. Plus, we cannot forget that Poseidon follows the trope of the 2 other ancient weapons by having its name be associated with a planet. And of course, because of the vicious nature of Sea Kings, it was very easy for the world government to brand them as a weapon and deem them dangerous to the world. Next up is Pluton. Often depicted as a massive battleship or warship, its design and capabilities suggest it might have been a hull or a central command module. Its destructive power could stem from advanced energy sources or weaponry integrated into its structure. We know that Pluton has been stated to be resting under Wano. But what if Wano isn't its original resting place? What if its original resting place was Alabasta, but then it was moved? When you think about Wano, Wano is surrounded by the ocean. And we know due to the ginormous waterfalls that surround it, it makes this country very hard to access and navigate through. Now here's what I'm asking. Could water also be a component for Pluton? Or could Pluton be an important component for the water around it? What if Alabasta was its original resting place and then it was moved? And because it was moved, it turned Alabasta into this barren wasteland. It turned it into a desert. Because after all, what is a desert? It was a place that held vast amounts of water, but then dried up. Now, if this is true, having an ancient weapon accidentally glass a planet, it would make it extremely easy for the world government to brand it as a weapon. Could this be explained as the machine's means of regulating environmental conditions necessary for its operation? Who knows? But I do know this, just like any powerful power source or energy generator, if left unstable, usually leads to disaster. And again, if this is so, this would make it extremely easy for the world government to brand it as a weapon. Now together, these three components form the core infrastructure of the ancient voyage machine. A machine intended for mass migration or colonization off the planet. The legendary figure Imu devised a plan to stop them. I talk about an ancient disaster. Could they have done this with the flood? And if so, was the ancient voyage machine the first ark? We are the last ark. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. Grand Line Bound, let's go.
Thanks so much for watching. If you've made it this far, you've just won a replica of Hattori's hat, let me know where you want it delivered in the comments. Check out our Discord and also a brilliant creator known as Middleway 101 who is ahead of the theory curve. Definitely one to look out for. Make sure you've mashed the sub button, left a like and shared with your parents. Be nice to people, look after yourself, and bye.